Welcome to Church Biz. I am your host, Reverend Patrina White McClure. I have a very special guest on today. But before she is introduced, let me remind you that WCEG is your 501c3 nonprofit community radio station. So if you are looking for a place to sow seed, we ask that you call us at 404-490-8646. And I want to give that again, 404-490-8646. And we will be sure to make sure that your desires are met. Please follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and now LinkedIn. And so you can connect with any of our shows there. We have a whole plethora of shows for your various needs. And without further ado, I would love to introduce the beautiful Senora EnEsse, or we'll just call her EnEsse. She's an author. She's a sign language professional. She teaches in various capacities, not only sign language, but Spanish, and she does French. So, EnEsse, welcome to Church Biz. How are you?
Hola, me llamo Señora Inés y estoy feliz de estar aquí. Hi, I'm Señora Inés and I'm very happy to be here today.
Oh, it is a privilege and an honor to have you with us because your skill sets supersede the assumed community from where you are. And so anyone looking at you would think because you're African American, you only speak English. But how can you tell us about your journey into doing these multiple languages?
Oh, sure. Okay, so it actually started about 15 years ago. I started learning Spanish in school because in Georgia, you're required to take a foreign language for some time. I'm not even sure what it was. I took it more than the minimum because it was the first time I felt like I was actually good at something. I had a teacher who believed in me, and keep in mind, every day in her class, I was asleep every single day. My Spanish teacher in seventh grade and eighth grade, every day I was asleep. I would be up for like short bursts, and then she introduced us to Celia Cruz. And I had never seen a Black person who spoke Spanish up until that point. So I was like, oh my gosh, she sings and she's Cuban and she looks like me. So I fell in love with her music. And then Beyonce dropped songs that were in Spanish. So I was like, oh my gosh, there are people who look like me who speak Spanish. In my eighth grade year, so my second year of speaking Spanish, she invited me to participate in this competition and I did really well, but I saw people there for French and Spanish. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool to see so many young people learning about other cultures and other languages.
Amazing. But I believe because of me being acquainted with you outside of this particular platform, I've had the privilege to see you develop over the years. And really, your communication skills have already been there. It's like when you're talking about that point of getting to middle school, you were already communicating pretty effectively even at 2 or 3 or 7 years old, because I remember there was one instance you were speaking baby talk, and then when you were asked to communicate with one of your siblings, even though you could understand adult English, you turned and started talking baby talk to your brother to find out what he was trying to say, and then you turned back and interpreted what he said. And I think you were 3 and he was 2, something like that. So you kind of have been doing this all your life, and it just kind of connected, I think, when you were in middle school, where your destiny was taking you. And so you went to various Spanish fairs, but when did sign language come a part of this? Because you can hear, you can talk. How did you develop that passion?
Okay, so it actually started with French. I started taking French in elementary school and I didn't like it. I absolutely hated it because it was a bad experience. So I learned stuff, but it was a bad experience, so it didn't stick. And then in middle school, they said, "Do you want to learn Spanish or French?" So I chose Spanish, of course. And then in high school, they were like, "Well, you can take," I was in the International Baccalaureate program. And so the options were to take history or economics, biology, or or art or French. I chose French. The other ones were out of my scope. They weren't a part of who I was created to be, to study those in detail. So I decided to study French and I took Spanish and French at the same time for 3 or 4 years, 3 years. And the first year I took French, I was like, well, French is just like Spanish, basically. It's just minor changes in pronunciation, but like the setup is the same. And I've always saw the interpreters at church and I wanted to like learn. And the opportunity presented itself with classes on Saturdays. And like, what high school student is volunteering to take classes on a Saturday? Apparently, just me, because it was me and one other student, and we went to these classes and I learned sign language. And I was just like, I fell in love. Like, it was, it opened up a whole new world. And at that point, I was experiencing so much loneliness and depression, and I felt so like I had friends. Well, no, I was able to associate with people who played sports. So all the popular people, all the people who play sports, I was able to associate with the people who were considered nerds because I was in the IB program. I was able to I was in various clubs. I go into this in the book, so it's in more detail in the book. But I was able to participate with people of different backgrounds. So I had relationships with different kinds of people, but I didn't know it was attached to my destiny. I just was like, well, learning this language allows me to make friends in the Spanish club. Learning French allows me to make friends in the French club. I learned sign language and I made friends in the ASL club. So it just opened up so many opportunities. And then I was introduced into the deaf community, and that completely changed my life.
I remember one time I was able to witness you. You started speaking to a group of deaf people, and you all connected. So that was the end of that. You were with them for a while. And then soon as you walk out of that conversation, because they're surprised that you can hear and talk. And I want to stay right there for a moment. What was the significance about them being surprised that you could hear?
It wasn't okay. So a deaf person, let's go ahead and redefine this position because a lot of hearing people have a negative connotation that it's a disability. It's just a different ability. So a deaf person is someone who listens with their eyes and they talk with their hands. And this is a capital D cultural deaf American that I am referring to. There is a lowercase d who isn't necessarily a signer. They may communicate through other modes, but the way I did my deaf studies program was with the focus on American Sign Language interpreting. So for that group of people you're talking about, when they were surprised that I could hear it, it wasn't that they were surprised that I could hear. They were surprised that I could speak Spanish because there was another group of people there who spoke Spanish, and God just placed me literally physically in the middle of two groups that changed my life. So it was just like my family was here. This group were the Spanish speakers, and then this group were my deaf friends. And anytime I meet someone who uses sign language, we instantly become friends until we're not. I haven't had any people that we're no longer friends, but maybe it'll happen one day. And if it happens, it's because it was that season for it, and I'm going to accept it and make peace with it. But they were surprised that I was able to speak Spanish and English, because I told them that the group of people that I was talking to right there were Spanish speakers.
That is so amazing how your mind can process all of that information. So, do you think it's because you started so young with it, and in America, we don't always focus on raising our children to focus on the different languages, or what are your thoughts about that, especially since you are an educator?
Okay, so well, my company is EnEsse Reviews, so a lot of our stuff in the past has been specifically with a trilingual curriculum. But I, in this new year, I was called to shift and to get out of my comfort zone and to get into my growth zone. And so before now, I wouldn't have gotten in front of the camera and gotten in this interview. This wouldn't have happened without God stepping in and telling me it's time to change and it's time to grow. So now I am no longer just a trilingual youth instructor. I am a multilingual, intergenerational, global community liaison. So yes, I work with kids. One of our programs is the sign language and Spanish programs, but it's not just with kids. Because of how we've had to do these things the last couple of years, we shifted from being in person to being online. So parents learn for free with my course because the purpose is to teach the value of effective communication using sign language and Spanish for support. To do this, I want to increase deaf cultural awareness as well as cultural diversity acceptance, because it is important for us to raise multilingual kids who are open-minded, who have the ability to ability to navigate between cultures, not caring about a language barrier, but caring more so about the goal of working together to accomplish a global community, honestly, to put it in short words. So.
And it's the differences that people tend to use in the different communities to separate or to remain separate, and then look at themselves as superior, or as if the other communities that are different than them, that there's something wrong with them. So I like how you said developing that global community. You know, I believe that there's beauty and greatness in all communities, and God just lets us have the differences to help us to be intentional to connect with our other human counterparts. And so, but I like how you do that with your languages, and you still teach for a private school as well, correct?
The private school I'm working with now, I'm not a teacher, but I do provide services for students who are deaf, blind, or have multiple disabilities and complex communication needs. So this one is a different scope of students. I love the work it does. I love the opportunity to give kids access to communication, because it's important that they understand that no matter where you are, as long as there is another person there, and even if that other person is God, communication is happening. You can think about it. Have you or any other woman you've known been in a bathroom, a public bathroom, and there's no toilet paper? And there's somebody in the stall next to you, and they're like, you knock on there, and you're like, hey, I need tissue. And you whisper it really soft. And you're like, I need some tissue. And they like wrap up a whole bunch and pass it under. That was communication without you realizing, like, in my most vulnerable state in public, someone else was there to communicate with me and help me achieve the goal of the request that I needed or that I made. And so, even with just a bathroom stall, I want you to understand that your classroom for a language instructor is not limited to the four walls that you're used to in a traditional class setting. So, for me, my students love my courses because our classroom can be on the playground, it can be at the lunch table, it can be in the classroom, it can be on a bathroom break. My classroom is not limited to walls. My classroom is beyond limit. It's like God is limitless because wherever you go, communication is happening, even if it's communication within yourself.
Amen. Amen. And you bring out a special point there. We have a relationship with ourselves, but we have to recognize it as that. So why not develop effective communication with you? And as you do that, you develop the skill set to communicate with others. And communication also happens to be one of my favorite topics. And because everyone has a message. Sometimes they're frustrated with getting it out, because they may not know the mechanisms with which to convey their message or to get that message over to whom they want it to be received by. But that's a never ending subject for me. You can't just give up. Oh, I'm done. You have to keep trying until you find what works. And how do we know that it's working unless the receiver of the message doesn't want to do that? If they don't want to receive the message, that's something different. But we know that our message is effective or it was received because you see the receiver responding in a way that's commensurate with what you're saying to them. So, what are your future goals as a communicator? Where do you see your journey in about 5 years?
Okay, so I started earlier talking about the services we are transitioning into. We've already been offering them, but now we're going big. Why not? So the first one is the trilingual courses. They're virtual. In the future, I will have in person, but that we'll wait till that time arrives. So the trilingual course, and then the second thing we offer, there are three things. So this is a sign language tool. It's a way to make a list. You know how you go, you in the kitchen, but you got to go grab that one thing out the bedroom. But in between getting the thing from the bedroom and going back to the kitchen, you forgot what it was. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so that happened to me a lot growing up, but I realized it might be the change in the lights because, like, the light in the kitchen might be lighter or darker than the one in the hallway, and that one might be different than the one in the bathroom or the one in the bedroom or wherever you're going. So as you cross into those different thresholds, there are many distractions that come, and if you're not focused on what's on that list or you didn't write it down, then you might have forgot between here and there to get the thing you came to get. So this is a tool that I teach parents how to teach their kids to not necessarily, well, yeah, to follow directions, but like specific directions. So for kids, depending on their age, I cap it at 3. My 1-year-old can handle 3 different directions in 3 different languages as long as I give her this list. So this list right here, it would be like, all right, so first I teach the trilingual courses. And then the second thing is I work with ambitious people Usually young between 18 to 24, that range, as they're transitioning from their youth into their adulthood, between that college age range. And I work with them so that they can achieve a balanced lifestyle without having to go through those extended long periods of trials and tribulations that I had to experience if they don't have to. God allowed me to gain my testimony by going through what I've gone through so that I can help others skip over those unnecessary steps so that they can go further. So I work with ambitious young people or people who are ambitious in general as a personal improvement and motivation partner. And this way, we achieve these goals. So I tell people, don't tell me your goals if you don't want me to hold you accountable. Don't say, oh, I want to do this or I want to do that. Because if you tell me, I'm going to keep asking you about it. I'm going to get on your nerves so much. You're going to ignore my phone calls. You're going to ignore my texts. But I have those people who I'm on them so much that they appreciate it. And then they wait for my next phone call. So when I call, they're like, oh, well, since that last phone call, here's that update. I wanted to let you know that I did this. And for me, I feel like a winner when all of the people around me are winning. And that's the purpose of this, is to create more winners within our global community. So as an intergenerational liaison, I work with the young kids and their families, and I work with schools. So that if the youth is our future, if we don't invest in them now, we're screwing ourselves over, because we're going to be the older ones and they're going to be taking over these kind of roles that we're in now. And if we don't basically raise them in an open-minded mindset, if we don't raise them in that kind of way, we keep continuing this cycle of brokenness and pain, of racism, ableism, and all of these different sexisms and isms that keep us separate, versus changing their mindsets to put us as a group of people. And then the third thing we offer is for business owners, because those are the other people in the community. The business owners are monumental because the world doesn't run without them. Business owners have services that are needed, for the most part, that are needed. But what happens if your services are needed by someone who doesn't speak your language? What if they don't know your company exists and language is the only thing keeping them from reaching their full potential? So I created this program. I call it EnEsse Worth. So we're networking for net worth, and net worth, yes, in the financial sense, but net worth in the spiritual sense as well. Because if you're working with if you're focusing on your net worth spiritually, that means you're focusing on removing the things that aren't like God, that aren't in alignment with who you're supposed to be, and you're adding those things that increase your relationship, the strength of your relationship with God. So the EnEsse Worth program, I work with business owners who are deaf, who are Black, who are in the LGBT community, who are in those groups that are constantly pushed aside, and the ones that get the least amount of funding. I want us to keep the money within the family. If they don't want to give us their money, that's fine. But if we keep our money within our own communities, we get to raise our kids seeing products and services from people who look like them. We get to raise more CEOs instead of employees.
Awesome.
I'm
Awesome.
sorry, that was a long rant, but that was my, yeah.
Oh, that's fine. And I love how you said that part about raising CEOs as opposed to employees, because some of us do have the calling to be CEOs, but we can't always see it because we don't have that mindset developed, because most parents are like, go get a job, work 8 to 5 and blah, 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 blah. But sometimes we shortchange them, or they're not able to pursue other avenues to discover who they are in Christ if we keep giving them the same menu to eat from, if you will. And so that's why it's really critical that parents be intentional about how they raise their children. They just can't just raise them and make it up as they go without consequence, because there are
And
consequences either way.
and there are so many kids that are out here. There are so many adults that are out here who are unparented, who had
Mm,
to learn things the hard way, who had to learn things from the street or from their friends. So they might not have had those parental figures, or they might have had them but didn't have access to quality ones. And I know I go into this in my book, like I have an amazing mom, like an amazing mom, but my father figures weren't necessarily my biological father. These were the people God sent, my earthly angels that God sent exactly when I needed them, because there was 7 times when I tried to take my life, 7 times that I remember specifically. And in those 7 times that I attempted on my life, I constantly heard my biological father's voice telling me that I everything, the enemy was using his voice to convey the
mm,
enemy's thoughts. And I couldn't hear it because I was being bullied so much. I didn't even like myself. I didn't grow to like my hair until I was in college. And for so long, I hated myself. And this is what made me write the book, is because I don't want anybody else to have to feel that way. And I I made it through 7 times. I made it through. Like, I'm the worst person to try to do that because I keep failing at that. And that's the only thing that I'm really excited about failing at, because now I'm at the point where I'm so blessed. I understand why the enemy was trying to take me out. The enemy been trying me all week, even today, this morning. Like, the enemy been trying me so hard because the enemy understands that, like, that other people feel this way. Other people feel alone. Like, when, I'm sorry, short story, but I was visiting at a school for the deaf. I don't think I can say the name, so I'm not going to say it. I was visiting at a school for the deaf, and I had the opportunity to interview almost all of the student population. And it was working under my professor. So I'm just helping her collect data. But as a as her professor assistant for that week, I got to stay immersed in a deaf world. I got to stay on campus, and I saw sign language happening, and it was completely voiced off. And it was one of the most amazing experiences that you can't get just anywhere else. You have to be invited into this world, into this community. And I was invited with open arms. And what I learned there was so many of those kids, 13, 14 years old, they grow up in neighborhoods and they can't communicate with anybody on their street because no one uses sign language. So they go away to these residential schools and they get to hang out with their friends, and they stay there on campus in dorms. But on those breaks, when they have to go home, they feel alone. They feel sad that their friends are so far away. So granted, now that we have technology, they can video chat with their friends. But beforehand, my teachers, my sign language teachers, they didn't have video chat like we have today with FaceTime. They didn't have Zoom. And so I believe deaf people actually inspired the creation of video chat and Zoom, because when text messages happened, it gave them an easier way to communicate with someone that wasn't in the room with them, as well as the same with the video chat. So feeling alone when I was growing up, it inspired me to try to make less people feel alone. And I feel like the more we love on our neighbors, as the Bible says, as just being a human should be, the more we love on each other, the easier it'll be to have less school shootings, to have less pain, not necessarily physical pain, but like to have less pain from emotionally distraught people who can't handle relationships because they didn't learn that. So I know this is a long spiel about your question, but it is important that we raise these kids multilingual. It's important that we as a community become multilingual at any age, because you're never too old to learn. And once you remember that, because a lot of people forget that as they get older, you're never too old to learn something new, and especially a language. It opens up the opportunity to travel. It opens up so many opportunities. And if you ever met an older person who says, huh, what did you say? If they say that a lot, they might as well start learning sign language, because why not?
You know, I do want to mention about, for those of us who speak English, Atlanta Mental Health Helpline number is 770-573-9546. Out of curiosity, do they provide services for people who are deaf communicators?
Typically services like that do, and they have a TTY number that allows the deaf person to call in and use a different form of video chat to communicate, because in the middle of it, like the middleman is an interpreter who uses sign language and they speak to the professional. But also there are services like BetterHelp now that offers virtual therapy. Like you can type and communicate with a licensed therapist. You can have video chats, and they're probably deaf therapists out there. And if you are watching this video and you're a deaf therapist or know one, please send them to me so that I can refer people, because there's so much trauma in our world. And I go into that in the second half of the book. I go into about how to heal that trauma so that you can move forward in your calling, and so that God gets the glory out of your testimony. And so
Amen.
my goal is for as many people to heal those wounds, because we can't move forward until we heal ourselves.
Amen. That is so true. So I do want to say these numbers out loud, and now we know, and you can be signing to the deaf community, if you will, that they can get the mental health help that they need as well. And so the mental health crisis text line is HOME or 741-741.
741
741.
74.
And then the suicide prevention helpline, call 988 or text 988. I think I'm saying that correctly, or both.
What's the text line?
HOME. Oh, that's what it is. Text HOME to 741 741. And then there's a Atlanta Mental Health Helpline, 770 573 9546. Amazing, amazing. Thank you for that. One of the things, I think we need to get a little bit more into the meat of your book, since you already stated the overall purpose or the vision of your book, which is to help people to heal from their pasts so that they can walk into the fullness of the calling of God on their lives. And so, what were some of the things you did to get the help that you needed?
Okay, so the one thing I did is I've always been someone who prefers things that are organized versus things that are chaos. I can't think straight if my room is dirty. I can't function properly if if my environment doesn't allow me to mentally, because if my environment is cluttered, my mind gets so cluttered, I can't accomplish what needs to get done. And so while I was in college, I had three jobs almost at any given point. I had three jobs, or I was finding three different ways to earn an income, and I was living below a livable rate wage. And as expenses increases, expenses increase, unfortunately, our wages have not increased as like a minimum wage has not increased to match that. So people have to have multiple jobs. And I wasn't one of my classmates who had their parents paying for everything. So I had to go to work, and I would be walking from work. And this, like, I remember one specific walk, and this was the walk where I broke down. And at this point, I was already going to therapy. I had at my school, they offered therapy for like, we're already paying for it in all of our fees. So I was going to the free therapy because I'm already paying for it. I might as well get my money's worth. And I went to therapy so much they kicked me out. They told me that I maxed out on my hours. And I remember in my last session, the lady was like, she didn't understand. She just couldn't understand one thing. She understood what it was like to be a woman in a man's world, but she did not understand what it was like to be a Black woman, period. And she couldn't comprehend how much being Black impacts my life, because it never has impacted hers. And that's the sad part, because we we take our hearing mm, for granted, and we don't think about how it impacts the lack of communication. Like, so many things don't have closed captions. Or I was watching something yesterday, and it made me so frustrated because in the closed captions, it changed the words and it didn't cuss, but they spoke cuss words, and they made it TV friendly or kid friendly. And I'm like, no, deaf people cuss too. They deserve access to these words. And they stole that opportunity for a deaf person to fully experience that show or movie, whatever I was watching. And so in this book, I was talking about this walk I took. And I'll call this my first real walk with God, because I grew up in church. I was in church more than I wasn't. Like, so I spent so much time in church. So I knew all the stories. I knew all of that. And then it was like, I needed that one thing. I needed that experience to say, God, I can't do this anymore. I've leaned on my own understanding, and it sucked. Like, I was getting divorced at the time. Well, I was trying to get divorced, but my ex was making it difficult, stole my car, and then it was just trying to get to work and school. And I started dating my now husband. And this time God sent my husband and one of my, I call him my best friends. God sent them at the perfect time, because I was at my lowest point, and that was going to be attempt number 8. And that might have been the one. And I was walking home and from work, and it was about a 1.5 mile walk, and I had to get to school. So all I had was enough time to take a shower and get to school. And I didn't have a car, so I had to walk to school. So it was like, it was going to be a really long walk, and it started raining, and I just felt so unprepared. And I was walking, and I was cold, and it was raining, And I just was like, God, I tried everything I could. Like I planned, I made my 5-year plan. I accomplished everything on the list. And it's not right because I'm still, at that point, I still was struggling financially. I still felt alone. I was living so far away from family, but I would come back and visit and spend so much money to come home to visit. And when I would get home, there were certain family members who would verbally abuse me to the point I wished I kept the money that put me further in debt and stayed where I was at school. And so this one specific walk, it was the middle of the day and it wasn't raining when I started walking. But in the middle of this walk, it poured down. And I just was like, I give up. I give up. I can't do this anymore. They told me that you could carry my weight, because you can carry my yoke, because it's too heavy for me. And at that point, I'm trying not to cry. I'm trying not to go back into that space because it's taking 60 plus hours of therapy to get to here. So I was crying in the rain. I got home and I just couldn't stop crying. And this was like my first real conversation with God. And then like I left home and then it stopped raining until I got to the bus stop that like I had to walk from my house to get to the bus stop to get me on campus. And so I walked to the bus stop and I'm like, oh, perfect. The bus will be here. And it's like I'm dry and everything. I got my umbrella. The umbrella didn't work when it started storming. The umbrella didn't work when I got on the plane. Got off the bus and was walking to the library to get to my class. And all of my classmates are in there like, ha, 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 why are your clothes wet? They all had cars. They all had less struggles in the same ways that I was. So it looked like they all had it all together. And here I am struggling with everything, struggling to hold myself together. And here I am so tired from working an 8-hour shift, walking and being exhausted. And I get to class and I'm like, I can't keep doing this. And so that was when I asked God to help me. And so the first half of the book, it goes into detail about the different areas of my life I had to get organized so that I can breathe, so that I can not be stressed out. Like I am living in peace, and anything that costs me my peace right now, I don't need it. And so it's because I've lived in so much chaos that my peace is so valuable at this moment. I don't care what amount of money is attached to something if it takes my peace. And so the first half is that self-help aspect where I go into those details of those areas. And the second half of the book is my testimony. And for some people who read it, and if you know me, you might read this second half of the book and you're like, oh my gosh, like she's really bashing these people. It has nothing to do with these people. It has everything to do with God. God gets the glory from this story. And I mean that 100%, because if you're reading it the way I intended it, the book goes, this happened, that happened, that happened, that happened, that happened, that happened. And you're like, dang, that sucks, dang. And then it hits that comma, but God. And that's how the book ends, comma, but God.
Praise the
But not
Lord.
literally. I'm sorry. It doesn't literally end like
But I mean, but we understand what you mean by that. But God is able to change any situation for your good, because God is good. He'll take every thing that is negative, or the good, the bad, the ugly, and the indifferent, and he'll turn it into good, because we love him and we've been called according to his purpose. And so as we develop our relationships with the Lord, we'll find that we are growing, that we don't become stagnant, you know. So anybody, to me, that says they're a Christian and they don't grow, there is a problem with their faith journey. Now, how can people purchase your book? Tell us the title, and then I mean, not the whole title, but you get what I'm saying. Tell us your title, show us the book, and tell them how can we purchase your book.
Okay, so my book can be purchased on Amazon, but as I am a self-published author, as many people are through Amazon, it is difficult for those who are getting started. However, I have a direct link accessible from the store on my website. My website is my business name, EnEsseReviews.com. And the book is called The Audacious Mentality Needed to Get Myself Together. It says another word on the book, but we'll go self because this is church biz. So, yes, what the audacious mentality needed, I wanted to explain my cover because it's significant to me, but I don't think anybody else will understand it unless they understood me. So the audacious mentality needed, DAMN, are the initials of myself and my siblings. So I'm the N, and I have siblings who are DAM, and so we call ourselves my mama's DAMN children, because it's just funny. Why not? So speaking of funny, so I have an interesting cover, what I like to think, because the sheep is me. That's my face added onto the sheep. And I have a line in a book that I actually used on a scholarship on a scholarship application that I won to go study abroad in Spain. It didn't cover everything, but God gave me enough to get there. So I applied for the scholarship, and the opening line of this essay was, I am the black sheep of my black family. That's because I didn't fit in, and I spent my whole life feeling alone because I never fit into a mold. And I've always tried to be so many different people just so that I could be liked, so I wouldn't feel alone. So I used the play on the words of being a black sheep of my black family. So that's how I got the sheep. And then the money, it's a self-help book. And money, this is gold, it's not green money. So the gold represents that silver and gold have I not, but at least I have a relationship with God. And that is greater than anything that can be purchased. God gave me stuff that I cannot buy, that you can't buy. God gave me peace. God gave me love. And when I've hated myself, God gave me someone who loved me so much, I learned how to love myself. God gave me a child when I've always said growing up, working in all of I always said two things. I always said, I don't want to be a teacher and I don't want to have no kids, because I was always doing basically what I'm doing now, just in different capacities. I was a youth ambassador for my church for the children's ministry. Summer camps, I was working junior staff at the Boys and Girls Club. Well, I wasn't official junior staff, but like I was so in love with the concept of helping people that I wanted to be a junior staff. So I was a junior staff for junior staff. So there's that. I worked with daycares, I worked with preschools, I worked with private schools. I've worked with my siblings, my nieces, my nephews. I've worked with so many kids in my life that I didn't want to do that when I got older. When I grow up, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be rich, so I don't got to deal with all this stuff. I don't want to have to deal with broke people problems. That's what I always had the concept of. And it wasn't necessarily those broke people problems. It was that broken mindset that I had. And I didn't know it was an issue. Give me one. I was dealing with that broken mindset. And so that was the opposite of what this is. And so this is the opposite of being broke, is having the gold and having the, not necessarily monetary aspect of it, but having prosperity. And so, as I said, I never wanted to have kids, and I never wanted to teach. And here I am in love with teaching, and even more in love with being a mom.
Congratulations. One more time, where can people purchase your book and where can they follow you on social media?
Okay, so my book can be purchased at EnEsse Reviews.com. That's my website, EnEsseReviews.com. And if you have issues getting to the website, just go ahead and follow us on Instagram and Fanbase. I go live on Thursdays at 1 o'clock on Fanbase, Eastern time, 1 o'clock. And that is the letter NS and then the word reviews and then LLC after that. And yeah, go ahead and follow our pages. This year, I am in my growth zone and I would love to share my journey with you, but I would love to work with everybody who is watching this video. Every single person who is watching this video, I can work with you because I am a multilingual intergenerational global community liaison. And if you live in our global community and you want to work in a capacity that allows us to leave a positive legacy for the descendants that are coming, not the ones that are already here, because they see the racism and they see the hurt and pain and how unsafe it is for our family members to leave home sometimes. They see all of the brokenness. We're going to work on this now so that our descendants get to inherit a better version of this world.
Beautiful. And so how is it teaching your own child signs, Spanish, and you said French?
French, this girl is also learning Yoruba. I'm not teaching her that. We're learning it together. And she's also learning Italian. In the future, she'll learn Portuguese and we'll pick up another African language together. She's doing better at it than her dad is, but he's learning also. Honestly, everybody in our house, we have 11 people who live on our land, and it's not my house. We are blessed to live in the house of my in-laws. I am so grateful for them. Actually, let me go ahead and give my shout outs. I didn't do it earlier on. So since we're about to close, let me go ahead and do this. First of all, I want to say thank you to God for this opportunity to share this platform with the people that are here and the people who this message will touch and the lives of those who would be affected from this message. I would also like to thank my mama because my mama dope. I would also like to thank my husband and our child. I'm gonna go ahead and thank my in-laws and my family, my siblings, my cousins, my friends who are family, my coworkers who show up. I would like to thank everybody who support me in any capacity, and my Spanish friends, my deaf friends. I would like to talk my Italian friends, my Portuguese friends, anybody who is attached to this community that I consider family. So those, and then not most importantly, last but certainly not least, as they say, I would like to give a huge thank you to the Artist Shop in Snellville, Georgia, for allowing me to do my interview here. And in the spring, I will be offering classes here in person, but it will be limited spaces. And as I grow up with my daughter, as we grow together, my husband, we are homeschooling her. She is actually receiving a customized Afrocentric, Montessori influenced, and multilingual, I guess, because of the languages, multilingual curriculum. And we have a homeschool cohort here in Atlanta, but if you're all over the world, this is the purpose of this, is so we can build this community, because it's becoming less and less safe for us to send our kids to schools. And I was speaking with a teacher one day, and she said, with what happened with that 6-year-old, you got to be scared of toddlers now. That's terrifying. And I feel like if we start using more of our village to raise our children, if we start using our village as support for the parents, the amount of changes we can make will be monumental. So with my daughter's homeschool curriculum, we're encouraging her to be ambitious, to boldly pursue a confident nature so that she doesn't allow what society has projected on us in the past, that broken mentality of being Black is not normal. No, I want her to see all of her professionals. Like, she just got a Black dentist. She just got she has a Black pediatrician. I want her to see so many of us, and if they're not us, I want her to see them speaking Spanish or a different language. And I want her to see deaf people, and I want her to see everyone in their capacity doing what they love to do. And that is why I'm so passionate to have the opportunity to homeschool her, because I personally hated traditional school. I was asleep in every class. In those days in PE where we took those quizzes, I took a nap just so I could say that I slept in every class at some point. So so I'm saying all this to say is I want her to experience this big, beautiful world that God created, but I want her and her generation to care about each other, and not only each other, I want them to care about, I want them to care about our environment. I want them to plant more trees. We need more oxygen, because when you don't have oxygen, you don't think straight. And it's a lot of people doing stupid stuff. So it's time for us to plant some more trees so we can have some more go into the brain, if that makes sense. So I'm excited for her classroom to be the world, because language happens everywhere.
That is so beautiful. And I love how you are intentional in your parenting and your teaching of your child, and you've developed a curriculum specifically for her, and that meets your family's vision of the family. We have just 3 minutes left. Thank you for being a part of our show. I just so appreciate you for making time to be with us, because I know you could have been teaching on today, making that money, but I'm grateful that you are here. Wonderful content on the show, because you went from how you got into your languages, but more specifically, how it's necessary to tackle your inner you, to develop your inside you, the person within, so that you can walk on those highest of highs in life. Everything doesn't have to be in the doldrums, but the most significant part of that is you made a choice. You recognized you made a choice, and then you took corrective action. Because even if you know what's wrong with you and you don't do the things that it takes to fix what's wrong, it means absolutely nothing. And so we have to be a people committed to not only being knowledgeable about what's happening, but being visionaries, meaning that you have a goal to work towards. Um, your book again is the audacious, okay,
Audacious
the
mentality needed.
audacious, okay, the audacious mentality needed to get your stuff together. Everybody, you can do this with Christ. And EnEsse has mentioned she couldn't get there without God. So you need him too. Even if somebody taught you that God isn't real, he is, just because you don't
Well,
think
I also throw this in the book. I've never seen a man give birth. Never. I mean, there was that one time in the news, but it was, yeah. But I've never seen a man give birth. But I have seen women give birth. And I have seen the idea that in the Bible it says that we are made in the image of God. And I'm a Black woman. I believe God is a Black woman, or the image of one. And we can refer to it as he or she, but that doesn't matter. God is our creator and our provider and our protector, and we have to respect that.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning into Church Biz. And do what I say always, take care.